Good morning, Josh.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry, guys, just struggling with Wi-Fi. If anybody has a solution, I'm all ears. But I'm here. Hi, Nick. How you doing? Hey, Ken, Jane.
How's it
That's
going?
very well, very good. Thank you.
I was gonna say you need to switch to Shaw. It'll work.
I might just do that. Telus is not cotton mustard right now, so.
Tell me about it. I used to work at TELUS, so I know how it feels.
Now they tell me it's because I have a Mac computer that my Wi-Fi connections aren't working. I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me. I'm not, savvy in this world, but that sounds fishy.
That doesn't seem to sound realistic. There's a mon he's into now. So.
All right, cool.
Oh, cable.
What was that? I got Enigma data. So go ahead. What was that?
It's Jason. Here,
Hi, Jason.
My picture. All right. Yeah, no, it's just cable it in. Forget the Wi-Fi. Good old cable.
Good old cable. Yeah, hardwired. Oh my gosh, it's like the Matrix. Plug me in the back of my brain. Let's do this. Hey, I got a better idea. Let's just go 5G, everybody.
There you
go. I'm kidding. Okay, what are we waiting for to get this party started?
No, waiting for you to join. We wanted to you want to do a little bit of an introduction, and then off we'll go.
Okay, wonderful. So we're going to do a little different of a meeting. Today I attended a BCREA Managing Brokers webinar last week, and BCREA is introducing a "What Would You Do" series, and they've created PowerPoints with speaking points, PowerPoint slides or a slide deck with speaking points for management brokers to teach to the agents. And they've got two topics up right now, and the one we're going to cover today is working out of area and why that's a challenge, what things you should really be aware of. Of course, we all know that your real estate license is great for all of British Columbia. And having said that, with the introduction of radon to our PDS, some of us are going, what the heck is radon? And, like if you didn't know, it's uranium based. It's a breakdown of uranium in the earth that comes out as a gas. For the most part is relatively harmless, but can be very harmful if it's floating in your basement or your house. You wouldn't know that. And of course, in British Columbia, particularly where we are, it's not an issue. But if you move into the interior and you decide, I'm going to go sell a house in 100 Mile, for example, or I'm going to go to Terrace, or I'm going to go to a Soyuz, you can get yourself into trouble, especially if you're fooled into thinking their contracts and our contracts are similar, the clauses are similar. What could go wrong? Radon, maybe. Like you don't know that an area has radon if you don't know the area. And so these are things that's only just a small aspect of the pitfalls. You could find issues of working out of area from, say, as an example, working in Burnaby coming to Poco. There are parts of Poco and going into Mary Hill. There are parts of Mary Hill that were initially created with underground oil storage tanks, pockets all over Mary Hill. And if you don't know that, it could be very costly. So essentially, Michael's going to lead us today on a PowerPoint from BCREA, and we're hopefully going to learn a little bit about the pitfalls of working out of area.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks, Josh. Aman, you want to go ahead and start the first slide for me? Awesome. So as Josh said, here we go. What would you do presentation series, working in your area of expertise. And I know in some of the office meetings previously, I've talked about this, staying with something, and if it's, out of area or something you lack experience in, you really need to lean on either referral networks or other people, say in your own office, that can help you and guide you through the process. I mean, to go into it, unknown is extremely dangerous. So next one. So we're going to set up the first scenario. We're going to have Sean, realtor. Doesn't that look like Sean Campbell a lot? Okay, next. We've got our buyers and Sean in the house. Next. This is actually kind of in some ways going back, but I mean, this could be a really serious concern, right now we're kind of, we flattened the curve and everything's good. But I mean, fall's around the corner. I mean, we're going to be inside a lot more. We're going to be in closer contact. So there could be definitely more concerns going forward with the virus concerns around COVID-19. The potential implications of COVID-19 on purchasing a property, and that dreaded the buyer's request to include a COVID-19 clause, which we talked about, I think, March, April, even into May again, that not to do it at that point in time. And we'll go forward and talk on that a bit more. Next. Considerations. Anyone have any thoughts? If you have any thoughts during the presentation, go ahead and type them in, and because there's going to be a little bit of interactive here. Next.
I'll add a thought to that. Just one of the there was a member from council on last week's webinar, and their number one topic or issue that they're experiencing right now are these self-constructed COVID clauses that have been put in contracts, all with the best of intentions and great hearts, but they were not constructed properly, and they're causing troubles. And we're going to notice some pretty big claims coming out of it as a result.
And it seemed like there was a clause that floated around that was quite similar, but when you actually sat down, tore it apart, and looked at it, it was rot full of pitfalls, right? Next. Well, the different considerations people have to think of, I mean, the one there, even funds, with COVID, we ran into some problems with some deals where all of a sudden their money is not as readily accessible as it was before. I mean, we didn't see a tremendous change in market value, but we don't know going forward where the market might go. I mean, we do know there's talk again of lower interest rates and holding very, very low for the next several years. But, another one is our due diligence, that we're doing the things that we need to do, and that we're doing things in our area of expertise. We're not creating lawyer-driven clauses and terms into our deals. And potentially you think you're doing the right thing, but I mean, you could be causing yourself a lot of grief. Next. Well, that was another issue. I mean, again, for right now, we've kind of hit a bit of a lull again with tenant occupied properties. And I think the last restriction, sort of in relation to tenant occupied properties, is going to end at the end of the month. And then the government has instituted till July of 2021 for repayment of rents that are owed during the COVID period. So, there's something to consider even in a deal. I mean, there could be, something added to a contract that may need to reflect that back rent that's due, that's coming forward, and who it's going to be paid to. Next. Timelines again. I think it was very, very difficult at times. I know some people that were pre-qualified before COVID started. And some of the lenders then turned around by, say, the end of March, early April, and were pulling the plug on their financing. So it made it very, very difficult for these people to go forward. And as we're all aware, I mean, we create these huge chains at times. So in order for them to buy, the seller they bought from has bought, and these chains can go on, and they can be quite lengthy. So one early non-completion can make a huge mess for everything subsequently going forward. Next. So legal advice. I mean, we're not lawyers, so we have to make carefully sure that we're not drafting clauses that a lawyer should be drafting. And always, if you're at a crossroads and you're uncertain, I mean, you always want to let your people know to seek legal advice from a lawyer, and take that burden off of your shoulders and put it onto someone that has the skill set to handle that.
Michael, can I add something around that
Sure,
clause?
you go ahead.
Yeah, so feel free to have I'd like to see a discussion specifically around legal advice, and if I may also add, the concept of making sure our buyers are talking to their insurance agents now. I can say that I've been doing this for 29 years, and gosh, you know what? Jane can cover your ears. Michael, you too. I don't know that I've ever taken the legal advice clause all that seriously, because we do have a degree of expertise in drafting contracts that are legally binding. I've certainly not taken the insurance clause seriously in the past until the most recent events around strata insurance have cropped up, and I realized, wow, there's some serious financial repercussions to obtaining insurance. Can properties be insured? What happens if you insure property that you're disclosing a material latent defect? And then, of course, what if there's an addition that was added on without permits? That's a material latent defect. What if there is aluminum wiring? What if there is polybutylene piping? So I've now specifically more than ever, these are really strong areas. Those two areas, legal advice and insurance advice, these are areas that I am wholeheartedly endorsing and encouraging, and setting them up with either Rick or a lawyer of their choice. And of course, encouraging and asking them to come back, to go to their insurance agent and asking them to come back to me and tell me what they learned. I'm doing a deal today where there's polybutylene piping and there's an illegal suite. So I've said, go to your insurance agent, find out how much that's going to impact your insurance. Make sure that you can be insured. So I just wanted to interject, because legal, but we see it, but I don't know that it's ever been taken that seriously from where my perspective is until now. That's all.
I mean, 18 years ago, if you had a home with a 60 amp service and aluminum wiring, for example, you could get insurance as long as you signed a binder that said within 3 months you'd upgrade the service and pigtail the aluminum wiring. And today it's just a non-starter. You know, you just plain old can't get it.
Yeah. So I would say Ken and Jane just put in there, the concern is it a way out for the buyer? So it's a great question. Like, yeah, it's a bit vague. I spoke to my lawyer. My lawyer advised me not to get into the contract. Well, I don't know if that's any more whimsical or vague than that. The wording isn't whimsical, but the excuse for getting out certainly is. So yeah, for sure it is. And I guess to that point, as agents, why are we sending them to the lawyer to get legal advice? What legal advice are we asking them to get as it relates to this pandemic? We're certainly asking them to go and find out how might COVID impact your ability to make this purchase. So they can have a discussion with the lawyer and be somewhat informed, more so than we can for them. Gail says, the last time she took legal update, it was recommended that you put that clause in the contract. Well, that's what we're talking about. The clause is actually supposed to be, the legal advice is supposed to be in there. And it's a very generic, go see a lawyer and have them review this contract with you. Anyways, so yeah, hopefully that answers your questions.
And the last one, COVID-19 clause, which we talked about at the beginning of this presentation, and we talked about it extensively in March and April. And we strongly advised against it, because the clause that was sort of a blanket clause. It sort of ran all over the industry there for a short time, but it was so wrought with pitfalls. They were talking about extensions to completion in that clause and all kinds of crazy things. So we're not lawyers. Don't be drafting those clauses, and don't be picking up on, something you see on Facebook, on a realtor Facebook post that you think is something that you're going to be able to use. It sounds great, but you have to be very, very careful going forward if you're going to add something to a clause, that's been drafted by somebody else. Next, Lamont. There we go. What would you do? Okay, go next. I mean, they talk about claims that licensees went beyond their expertise in providing advice, drafting clauses, negotiating resolutions or disputes on deals. We may see an increase in these as a result of the, present pandemic that we're suffering right now. And our business has been very strong, I think, for the last couple of months. But like I said before, we don't know where this pandemic's going. Yeah, there's some new stuff coming out in relation to standard forms and that coming up through BCREA.
Just to be clear on those changes coming out, Jay, are I would say more of the nature of clerical font size, boxes where sellers or buyers should be initialing. There's a degree of changing to wording for the contracts, but what they're trying to do essentially is take all of the forms that BCREA has and make a more uniform look and feel to them. So it's less about, brand new words. There are a couple. There's a new form coming out around material latent defect disclosure, and I'm looking forward to it. I believe there's actually a webinar through BCREA. All of you are welcome to join it too, by the way, the Managing Brokers BCREA webinar next Wednesday at 10 a.m. And it is about specifically the changes coming, the forms that are coming, and it's good stuff. So yeah, anyways, I hope that answers your question, Jay.
And also another form that I think the Fraser Valley Board, and I would imagine Vancouver's following suit, is a lockbox waiver form. There's been some issues lately in regards to lockbox use. And basically it's getting your clients to sign off, and they understand the implications of a lockbox. They understand that potentially there is a chance of theft. And there also is a chance that their home could be broken into if that theft occurs. So I think it'll be good discussion having that new form into our toolbox going forward.
I think they got the motivation for that particular form from Ken and Jane Ambrose. They have probably one of the best Schedule A's I have ever seen in the industry. It's as thorough as it gets, but when it comes to talking about a lockbox and or open houses, in particular to theft or potential theft, they're top of the industry with their Schedule A and their wording around that.
I mean, I think the one that was most concerning for me was a single family home that I read the other day through a message from Carl Powig for the Fraser Valley Real Estate Board. They went and stole the lockbox off the gas meter. And then the next day attempted to plan on going to break into the home, but it was discovered before that happened that the lockbox was missing. And they made provisions in place to secure the home so it didn't happen.
Recently, approximately 35 lockboxes were stolen from one of the offices in the Fraser Valley and removed. And so there was quite a kerfuffle around that. And one of our agents happened to be jogging in an area very far away from the location these lockboxes were removed from. And of course, saw, approximately what looked like 30 plus lockboxes. Sure enough, they were the lockboxes. And this agent let me know. I contacted the managing broker, happened to be the owner of that office, and they went over, collected all the lockboxes. But one of our agents had a lockbox attached to that cluster of lockboxes, and our agent was incredible, went straight to their owner, told them what had happened, and then made preparation for keying. And of course, it was strata condo, so you can only imagine there's a degree of cost involved in rekeying a building. And I personally have had a lockbox stolen from a strata building that had nothing mentioned about it in the bylaws, but when it was stolen, and of course we discovered it on a weekend and it was a holiday to boot, they had to rekey the entire building. And these were very special keys. Like, it was over $3,500. Yeah. And of course I paid it.
Yeah, it can be thousands of dollars. You are correct, Josh. So examples where realtors may be found to be acting outside their area of expertise, offering advice or not referring clients to seek professional advice when and where appropriate. And like Josh had mentioned, the legal advice clause that we add to our contracts, drafting clauses that we may not be skilled to be able to do that. So that's where, referring them to a lawyer, or us maybe getting in touch with some legal advice on our own if we need something specially drafted to fit a unique situation. This has always been a hard one for me. Number 3, residential realtors selling commercial or business properties. Extremely complex. You can't jump from residential into selling commercial, and I've done business properties as well, especially when you're talking about leases and improvements and equipment. And I mean, it is a unique animal completely. So if you're thinking of venturing into selling commercial or business type properties, you really need to work with someone else that has the skill and expertise to be able to do that and be able to learn the trade from them. Yeah, one of my pet peeves, Ken and Jane Ambrose. Thank you. Yeah, you just can't jump into things that you have absolutely no skill. And it's unfortunate our license covers the province and covers everything except for property management and strata management. So, you can get yourself in all kinds of trouble, potentially either with council or the superintendent's office, or end up in a lawsuit. I think Josh touched on number 4, being unfamiliar with property types with unique considerations, such as strata or rural real estate. I had a past client of mine come to me 3-4 weeks ago and wanted me to write on a lot that they'd gone and seen on Quadra Island. And I looked at it and looked at everything, and I said, I don't know anything about it. I don't know anything about that area. I don't know anything about the lot. And on and on. And I said, I'm going to have to decline. I said, do you want me to refer it to someone in the area? And they said, oh, no. They said, well, we used to live in Campbell River, so we know everybody up there. And, so I said, fine, go ahead, go forward. I mean, with one of the people that you know well. But I wasn't going to, for a second, venture into something that I knew absolutely nothing about. And that's number 5 that we're talking about as well, is providing services outside of your geographical practice area, not being familiar with zoning, bylaws, environmental issues, etc. That can happen, right? And another one, people think that because they have a real estate license that they can offer property management. I mean, that's something that I'm quite skilled at. And it's a lot more than just renting a property out, collecting the rent, and giving the balance to the owner. I mean, you've got trust accounts, you've got a whole list of reporting requirements that need to take place in order for someone to be able to offer those services. So it's not so simple.
I want to add to that. So a good friend of mine, great realtor out of New West, has what we have a regular real estate license, did her client a favor and collected a rental check from a tenant, put it in her bank account temporarily to get it over to her seller. There ended up being an issue with the tenant, not around the money. This agent is impeccable, but she just thought she was doing a good deed and helping out her client and a favor. Anyways, it got brought before council. She lost her license for a week and had to pay a $5,000 fine. And of course, it was published and it was embarrassing for her. And she thought, gosh, I've done this many times in the past. This seemed like a no-brainer. And here I am, you got a deal or a complaint, and she was in trouble. I want to add something. I'd like discussion. I know it's hard to have discussion, but at least by chat, if you guys have thoughts, and I'm looking for some thoughts around this. So I want to be clear in my mind. There's something different between saying, hey, I'm a realtor. I'm working the Surrey office. I'm working the Polk office. I'm working Maple Ridge. I'm pretty familiar with, let's say, farm property or acreages in my neck of the woods. And now I've got a client that wants to buy one in Chilliwack or wants to buy one somewhere in Stave Falls or Daru in Mission. And, they all look the same to me. So what's the issue? Or another example would be Aldergrove. So I think there's something to be said. If you really want to dig in on your specialty of acreages or farm or any area, that's one thing. You learn as much as you can and be prepared that for when you do end up in an offer, you're going there and you've got knowledge and you certainly know your way around the city halls. You might know more about the nuances. But I've got 3 examples that I'd like to share that are really important. I took a listing in Aldergrove. Aaron and I took a listing in Aldergrove a year and a bit ago. And, much to my surprise, I learned about for the first time an aquifer and an aquitard. These are language I've never had in my world before. And now I'm learning about an aquifer. But the challenge was I was already into the listing and I didn't know anything about these things. And I'm like, oh, this is a potential lawsuit. So if you find yourself in a situation like that, what I did is I went to the city, I had conversations, I Googled the bloody thing. I learned as much as I could so that I was very clear. Number one, did I price the property accordingly, given this information? So of course, I documented everything that I had done. I was already in the listing, and at that point, I wasn't recusing myself from it. But you might find yourself in a situation like that. Or most recently, I'm showing properties in Daru, in Mission. I've sold lots of properties in Mission before, but I've never been out in Daru. And if any of you know where that is, there's no cell phone reception there. It's very north Mission. It's not super east, but kind of. Anyways, there's a thing there called an alluvion fan hazard area. And does anyone know what an alluvion fan is?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Jay, you're wonderful. I don't. And I can tell you right there and then, I have since referred those clients because they're looking in areas where words are popping up that I'm not prepared to deal with, and I don't know how they're going to impact the land. So I was out. I tapped out. But you got to be careful because you just don't know what's going to show up in a certain area. Underground water rights. It's crazy stuff. So that's all I got.
Next. So again, they talk about practicing within your competency areas. I mean, addressed in Section 35 of the Real Estate Services Act. And they talk specifically about Section 3.3, our duties to clients, and Section 3.4, duty to act with reasonable care and skill of the real estate rules. And then we've got the other side, the Canadian Real Estate Association. Oh, and then we talk about, Ken and Jane mentioned foreshore rights as another one. In relation to waterfront properties. And then when we talk about the other side of the industry, they see the Canadian Real Estate Association and the BCREA. We've got the Realtor Code of Ethics. Are all things to consider. And everything that we do is looked at by other professionals, whether it's counsel, whether it's the legal system. We are professionals. So when we err, it comes back on us hard because we are deemed professional realtors. Next. Next. So acting outside your area of expertise and so they're talking about a licensee showing a bare land strata lot. The buyer asked the licensee if he could add some fill to the property to make it more suitable for their needs. The licensee recalled advising that there are no wetland covenants on the property, and she believed they could make the desired changes. After the buyer completed the purchase, they discovered there was more to the story. Next. I mean, any thoughts out there? Anyone want to type any comments? Where did the licensee go wrong? Next. Well, the Real Estate Council of BC Discipline Committee found that the licensee failed to advise the said buyers to seek independent professional advice, which we talked about early on in this presentation, on matters outside of her expertise, failed to use reasonable efforts to discover relevant facts respecting the property, and failed to make the appropriate recommendation to the buyer. It's easy off the cuff to say, yeah, you should be okay doing that, but don't make that comment unless you are 100% sure that your claim is substantiated. You can't make blanket statements that give the buyer a feeling that, yeah, it's good to go ahead, unless you're 100% sure that they actually can do it. Next. You know, how do you identify and reduce risk in this scenario? Next. Again, we talk about acting within your competence area. Consider where it may be best. And we don't want to lose money from our own pockets, but you know, there are times when it's the best interest of your client is really what's at heart. And if you have to refer, then you refer, you know, or recommend professional advice. And then as we talked about, I think at many previous meetings, you know, document, write everything down constantly so that you do have a trail if something does go astray along the way. Next. Go ahead, Josh.
I want to come back to document. I'm just curious. I don't know how you'd answer this in the chat box. Just give me yeses, everyone. If you're in a habit of making notes after you have a meaningful conversation with a client, buyer or seller, doesn't matter, but you're in a habit of doing it. I just want to see in this chat group, just give me a yes. I want to know who's doing it. And give it a couple seconds. Yeah. I love good answer, Ken and Jane. Sorry, there's a lot of yeses in here, which is wonderful. And then following up with an email, which is also just solid work. It's good business practice. That's awesome. Lots of yeses here. Good. Thank you. It's really good practice to get into the habit of making notes. Now, there isn't always meaningful conversations throughout the day when you're having conversations with your clients. And yet there are times when there are, and you've got to get into the habit of making that note. And in particular, when an offer's coming in and you're having conversations with your client, we're doing things digitally, you're going to want to start tracking, you know, TCT, TCF, telephone call to, telephone call from, and the date of the time that, not the time, but the date particularly. Time is great, but you want to start getting into the habit of making these conversations. And no doubt, like if you've said something to a client where you know, hey, we need to disclose something, put that in writing and then send an email out. But I want you to know that if you're, Ken and Jane, if you're ever before a professional conduct committee, they're going to ask you where your notes are. So you need to know that this is not just a great idea. This is like, you should be mandatory business practice for all of us that we are taking notes. Our team, by the way, has we have a Google Drive account, and we have just discovered that because we use one account, we all go into it, we can put their version of a Word document in there, and any one of us can go in there and insert notes. And these notes are particular. They're not the same notes we take when we go and list a property or collecting all that data and information. That's one version of a note, but we're not mixing that with the one we're talking about right now, which is the dialogue, the communication, and the professional advice you'd be given out and how you followed up with it. Those notes will save your bacon if you ever find yourself on the wrong side of the council. That's all.
No, that's awesome. So on to a second scenario where a licensee is acting for a buyer looking for a home in ski country. The buyer was from overseas and was not present to view or inspect the property. The licensee said he would ensure the buyer had all they needed in order to make an informed decision. The deal completed with the buyer being unaware that they could not move into the property full time as it had no restrictions in regards to owner usage. Next. So where did we go wrong? Any thoughts? Next. And this claim was resolved before it turned into litigation, but I mean, if anyone's ever known anyone who's gone through the process, I mean, so many hours compiling documents and statements and meetings with defense counsel. And the personal stress, I mean, you can't put that on any scale to be able to weigh it. Sleepless nights probably for a lot of people. Anyone that's been involved in professional liability claims, I mean, you can't underestimate how much that weighs on a person trying to go through that process. And it really does affect other aspects of their business. It really holds them back. So next. As
an owner, I've stood beside some of our agents that have gone through counsel claims and stood beside them while we hire counsel, or they hire their own lawyer, of course, and we're collecting the documents. But I can tell you the pain and anguish that they suffer through the year and a half that it takes to get to some kind of a decision is you just never want to go through it. You never want to be that person where a claim's been made on you. I've had 2 claims made on me myself personally. And so I can tell you from experience, it literally takes you out of the headspace of real estate for a temporary bit, because you just got this thing looming over you. You just, making notes is a really wonderful thing to save your bacon, working inside your area of expertise, which isn't saying out of area necessarily if you have an expertise in the area. Just be very careful how you mix those two.
Next, I'm on. Next. Identifying and reducing the risk, ensure you are competent to provide service specific to the property type. As Josh talked about earlier, he was talking about acreages, or whether it's a geographic location that you as a realtor are probably unfamiliar with. Consider whether you have the knowledge and skill to represent the client, considering standards of practice in the profession. And like I said earlier, don't be afraid to pass it on to someone that does have, or take someone on. Maybe you're going to co-list something. So you're going to take someone on that has the expertise to guide you through the process. Consider when your clients might be best served, like I said, referring them to someone with more knowledge and skill to represent their interests, and step aside if you need to do, right? You got that referral coming back, and you're not going to have that weight on your shoulders going forward where you've thought you've done everything right, but all of a sudden you've left a huge gap in the transaction that's going to come back and bite you. Next. So they're saying, what should Sean do? Next. Now, again, they talk about identify and practice within your competence areas. Provide fact-based information. As I said earlier, don't just shoot off the cuff and say, I think you can do that. I'm sure it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Go ahead and do it. Make sure that everything that you put forward to your clients is fact-based, and you have something to substantiate your claim. If you get something from the city, hold on to that, put it in your file, and so you've got something to fall back on in the future. Seek guidance. Go ahead.
Yeah, Michael. So if you're collecting information from the city, I mean, probably the most reliable source is you're emailing. They're going to reply back to you in email. If you find you've gone, and we're not doing this today, but if you've gone to the counter and spoken to someone, or you've made a telephone call to a department within the city, document the department you called, the day, the time, whom you spoke with, and then document the conversation. And that would go in my notes as well too, along with the conversations I have with my clients. But those are the sorts of things that we collect, keep in our notes, so that we always know what's what.
From a fact-based information position in regards to the cities and municipalities, it's been fantastic from the COVID-19 perspective, that everything that we're getting, we've got great communication with those people, and they're sending everything back by email. It's just fantastic. I mean, the stuff I've been getting back on properties is incredible. Stuff that, I haven't necessarily been able to obtain at the counter. I may be dealing with someone that, I don't know, maybe has a bit of a weakness in a certain area. And
yeah. Did I freeze? I froze.
Yeah,
nope.
For a second you did.
Okay, sorry. Sorry, I got excited when you said that. Yeah, you're right. The information coming back is fantastic. But if you're a buyer's agent, you may still be restricted with what you can collect. So we have a standard form email that we send off to the building departments typically for information on property, or the planning department if we think there's future development potential. But we have a standard set of questions that get asked every time, and the replies we're getting back are great. If you work for a buyer and you're wanting the seller to get that information, we'll give them a copy of that draft template so that they can send it on our behalf and get that information that we're going to require. Sometimes it's not enough to have the clause in your contract giving you permission to go, because the cities will reject you unless the seller signed off, even though you've got a contract. Maple Ridge typically won't give us that information.
No,
but they've been great for sure.
So again, some of the support and resources in regards to this presentation are, if anyone wants to follow some of this up, you can see there's errors and omissions in there. Real Estate Council BC, and then also BCREA has got some information as well. Any questions out there?
So what did Ken and Jane, so you'll need them before you ever, if if you ever before, yeah, okay. Did he look at the strata docs and provide them to the buyer? We have lots of specialists. Ken and Jane bring up a really good point. We definitely have lots of specialists in our office. And I know that the Insiders WhatsApp group chat is fantastic on asking for help. I've, actually, in my time as a realtor, I don't think I've seen as much cooperation as I see going on inside, certainly the Surrey office. I give them a lot of kudos for what I see there. And the way they communicate inside that WhatsApp group chat, it is absolutely next level incredible. And agents are always getting that kind of, there you go, Nick. They're getting that kind of help. It's just fantastic. It's heartwarming. So, and Ken and Jane, but if it takes 2 weeks to get something that would take 10 minutes at the counter, yeah, if you can get to the counter, my experience pre-COVID was that cities were not as cooperative. They were just sometimes a pain in the butt to get information.
They're a pain in the backside. I agree totally.
Yeah.
You send off a request via email. My first experience was probably in early April, and provided the right documentation to have them be able to facilitate my request, and I got everything I wanted within probably 36 hours.
Yeah.
Be prepared.
Be prepared as a listing agent to attach a copy of the MLS contract, the multiple listing contract, in order for the keys of the kingdom to be unlocked for you. That's been our experience as a listing agent, but we have a certain level of templated questions. If anybody wants a copy of those, email me, joshbath@kw.com. Email me and I will copy that email with those questions that are in it, send it over to you so you guys can keep it. And it's saved in our draft, because every time we take a listing, and we're getting good now with who we're going to email at the various cities, and they're saved in our Google contacts. They just pop up when we send it off, and we know to send a copy of the multiple listing contract, and away you go. They're really going to save your bacon when it comes to permits that have been taken out but never closed. That's one aspect. You might end up with a survey certificate. There's another, there's just lots. So joshbath@kw.com. I'll put it in here right in the notes, and you guys can get the one I drafted.
I mean, I saw Ken and Jane's comment about it taking 2 weeks for Maple Ridge. The one I was referring to was the Corporation of Delta. Extremely cooperative, extremely quick, and extremely thorough. So, I mean, that we all know that dealing with different cities and municipalities, they're all slightly different.
Slightly special.
My experience with POCO has not always been the best, but they're all different.
Cool.
Okay.
I'm assuming we're good here. If anybody has any questions right now, would be a good time for open discussion. Otherwise, we'll adjourn our meeting.
Yeah.
I love this part. Like there's when the faces are looking at you, but there's silence, and you're like, oh man. Am I frozen again? Did they hear me?
Yeah, it looks like we're all good, Josh.
Wonderful. Well, everyone, thank you very much for being on the meeting. I hope it was good for you. Thank you. We'll see you next week.
Have a good day, everyone.